Hi, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hi, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I am here today with Nils Grevillius. I know I'm butchering his name. I apologize for that. I can't roll my R's. I've never learned how. But yes, he is a private investigator. He is an author of several books, and he is a concerned citizen. We've had some great conversations, so I'm looking forward to this one today. Nils, how are you doing today?
I've never had a finer day. How are you, Courtenay?
I'm doing well, thanks. I am very glad to hear that. So for my audience, tell them a little bit more about you and what you do and how you arrived at that.
Well, I'm a private detective by profession. I do a little bit of writing and advocacy of a literary variety, but I wouldn't want anybody to think I'm a political operative or anything like that. And my private detective work is not matrimonial in nature. Most of my work involves conflicts of interest, homicides, missing persons, dead bodies, that sort of thing, threats from unknown subjects, cold cases, that sort of thing. I've also I've delved into gypsy crime quite a bit, which is a rarity in the sense that there's not much money pursuing it as a private detective, but I chose to make myself reasonably conversant in it. And I have a curiosity for culture and language, so gypsies have firewalled themselves off from us through a complex language, the roots of which aren't obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What made you decide to be a private detective?
Oh, probably conventional American ennui. Sitting in the classroom in about the first grade, I'm looking out the window and the teacher's droning on about something so important that it could turn me gray at age 6. And then I'd get dragged back in, figuratively speaking, and they would demand my participation, and I'd still have my head in the clouds, even with my feet in the mud, and I'd try to participate a bit. And then as I got older, I'd like see a Steve Mccain movie or something like that. And I'd tell my mom that I wanted a life like that. And she told me I was crazy, of course. I was supposed to be an academic or an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And I couldn't drop out of that fast enough. I joined the Army on my 17th birthday. I was a dropout with a juvenile criminal record for doing a little joyriding on a motorcycle, maybe with some stolen beer. Can't exactly remember. It was some years ago. Wow. So I joined the Army, and they adjusted me a bit and made me reasonably good at it. And then after that, I was going to become a police officer, but I couldn't pass the drug test, the psych test, the polygraph, or the background. So I settled for becoming a private detective. I didn't want to sit around a bank because let's say I took a job in a bank and I'm a young man and I've been all over the world already. And I've done a lot of work doing different things, important work in some ways. How am I going to sit in the bank all day and not think about tunneling in over the weekend? So it's better if I have a job that keeps me occupied. Mm-hmm. And I had a job in corporate investigation. I worked for Dun & Bradstreet. I worked as a Pinkerton detective. Often that was very buttoned down and corporate. It was okay. I learned a bit. Right. But the nature of it is that you will never get past just earning a living unless you're the one taking the risks. So I decided I'd take my own risks. And that's what I did.
Right. Wow. What was the biggest, what did you do for the Army, and what was your biggest lesson from serving?
It was kind of I enlisted as a cavalry scout, which is, conventional reconnaissance. It's not special forces or anything. And let's be honest, I wasn't that great a soldier. I mean, I was physically fit. I could accomplish all of my tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I was prone to boredom, and I'd make trouble when I'm bored, so they'd keep me unbored. Sometimes it would be painting rocks in the motor pool. Sometimes it would be walking around an ammunition dump with an unloaded rifle to make sure the raccoons didn't break in and steal the ammunition. But I spent some time in the DMZ in Korea, between North and South Korea, doing ambushes and reconnaissance patrols and that sort of thing. And eventually I got recruited to a military intelligence specialty within the Army and did that for a couple of years. And I wasn't any better at that than I was at being a math student, let's say, or predicating sentences in third grade English. I was a bit prone to boredom, and I'd create or I'd go off and work on things that I didn't have imprimatur to do sometimes. And so maybe I wasn't the best soldier. I mean, I didn't get in huge trouble or anything, but so I did 2 enlistments. I did almost 7 years in the Army and 3 tours in Korea. And then I worked for my civilian chain of command for a while, and was working around the world. I've been in a lot of places, and eventually I figured out that I had to get serious about earning a living. Nobody's going to support me. I'm not that good looking. I can't sing, dance, or tell jokes. So I had to do it. I wasn't going to be a realtor or a banker or something. I had an idea that I'd become a lawyer. My mother was a lawyer, and she was a very smart lawyer. So I started preparing for that, and then I realized I'd actually have to go to college to become a lawyer. So I took the examination that they administer for people to become lawyers in this nation, LSAT.
Yep.
And I scored reasonably well on it, but I was still looking at taking a baccalaureate maybe.
Mm-hmm. And
I started pecking around for a way to support myself through law school. And I went to a commercial diving school where they teach you to be a hard hat diver. I thought, that'd be a good way to earn, because hard hat divers earn about $250,000 a year as journeymen. That'd be a great way to support myself through law school.
Sure.
And so then I started asking about the availability of jobs and learned that it's a closed shop. The guys who get the jobs are the ones who have 15 years experience as military divers, or their father was a diver. It's like becoming a fireman or working on the railroad. You're not going to get that job, no matter what. So I didn't waste my time, and I'd been in the Pinkerton service. In the Army, I'd done a lot of surveillance work and investigation, and looking for wiretaps, and looking into the backgrounds of complicated individuals and situations. And I learned how to write a good report: third person past tense, first person present tense, any of these styles, dependent upon whom the selected audience was to be. And I decided I would give it a try. And relatively quickly, I was earning enough of a living to support myself through law school, but the idea of law school just became more and more remote. I guess I'm cerebral enough, Courtney. It just didn't interest me at a certain point. I knew I would learn the law working as a private detective, but I'd never practiced law, and I didn't want to waste my time or waste other people's time. So I stuck with the private detective work, and it just became more and more interesting. And I've had a wonderful time doing it. I anticipate doing it another 100 or 200 years, but
You'll have to tell me the secret to being able to do this for the next 100 or 200 years, because
it's very easy. It's very easy. Just don't get crosswise with the Clintons, and you'll do. I'm teasing Courtney.
Do you know that's actually a term in the Urban Dictionary? It is officially a term.
Arkansas.
Or, yeah, right, exactly.
So I'm just being funny.
Yes.
And I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just saying there is an actual term, to be Clinton is in the Urban Dictionary. So, yeah, that's where we are today.
Okay. Well, so that's how I became a private detective. Now, once you have your license as a private detective, how are you going to get people to come and pay you? All you have is a piece of paper from the state authorizing you to contract business with the public. And it's a level of license here somewhere between the bottom of the barrel and a professional license. I'll illustrate it for you like this. Some licenses are only granted for the government to collect a fee and keep track of how many people are doing it. Like if you're holding yard sales, let's say, and you pay for a license to do that. And then up at the top, you have doctors and lawyers and accountants, and they want to enhance the professionalism of those people.
Sure.
And ensure that the public is protected and have a method for punishing and regulating malpractice in those professions. Right. Well, with private detectives, they're somewhere in the middle. The state really doesn't have a prohibition on private detectives who steal from their clients. I mean, that's obvious. Grand theft, petty theft, whatever. You steal from your clients, you may get in trouble. It's California, though, and nothing is really illegal in this state anymore, other than maybe beating up cross-dressers or holding a protest at the Capitol.
Right.
So the state licenses the women and men in my profession to protect the public, to collect a fee, and to occasionally catch somebody doing something wrong. And there are some really wrong things you can do as a private detective, like defrauding your clients, perpetrating blackmail. And there's a lot of that. And there has been historically in the profession where a private detective gets a commission to take a case. Let's say Courtney's husband hires Nils to check up on Courtney because Courtney's husband thinks that Courtney is stepping out and having a good time when he's away working. So Nils, being an extortionist, he goes to Courtney and he says, "Now, darling, you don't know me and I don't know you, but I know all these things about you. And your husband thinks that you're taking a step out. So how about we do this? You pay me a little bit of money and I'll give your husband a really nice report and he'll know what a good girl you are." Wow. That is extortion.
Yeah, of course it is.
And there are women and men in my profession who do exactly that.
Wow.
Yes. Here's another means of extorting someone. Let's say, ancillary to my case, I discover that your husband is the reason he wants to check up on Courtney is because he's having an affair or two, and he wants to have backup, a little bit of like an ace in the hole in the event that Courtney discovers that her husband has been stepping out. And Courtney, being a woman who knows how to take care of business and has elbows sharp enough to defend her own honor, she goes to her husband and she says, "Now look here, I happen to know what you're doing," right? So that's why he wanted to know what Courtney was doing. So what if Nils takes that information that he learned investigating Courtney and he invites his client down to the office and he says, "Now look here, you've been a nice client. You're going to be an even better one once we arrive at a settlement over this. In the course of this investigation, I happen to discover there's a fair amount of infidelity in your marriage, all of it involving you, involving your secretary, involving a cocktail waitress, and involving some man that you met in the men's room at Griffith Park last Friday night. So how about this? How about if you double the fee or triple the fee, and your wife, whom you thought was cheating on you, will never be the wiser of it. You'll feel like so much better a husband for having paid me off." All right.
Wow.
Okay, so now all of this sounds not just like a recipe for homicide. It sounds like the setup for a novel, maybe written by Raymond Chandler, Eric Ambler, or somebody like that.
Uh-huh.
You know, I rounded the top of the stairs. It was the third floor landing. The air was pregnant with the smell of old tobacco and fried
Right.
food.
Well, I will tell you.
Inky light filtered in through the windows, but I knew where I was going. It was the third door on the left. Flickering beneath the door was the light of a television, obviously somebody entertaining themselves. I didn't have to approach carefully, but I did. And the reason I didn't have to was because she was waiting for me. The door was already open. She was sitting behind a desk that was glass, the size and shape of a coffin, and the TV indeed was on, but it was on static.
This is part of your next novel that you're writing?
She was smoking a cigarette, and she looked up and she looked down and she said, "I know you, and I know what you're about." And then she shot me. You know, okay, so that's classic noir, isn't it?
The classic
that's noir. I've
yeah,
written
totally. I was actually the very first lead role I had in a film was I played one of the girls who is hired to do the setup. It was called Fly Swatters. Yeah. And that was my role. So so I've heard of this sort of thing in the fictional sense. Yeah.
So those are the kinds of ways you can get in trouble as a private detective, but more commonly, we have the big three in my profession. And what I mean by that is lawyers get in trouble for raiding their trust funds. Doctors get in trouble for being overly friendly with their patients. And I think you know what I mean. Taking liberties when their patients are knocked out, or I will treat you if you for less if you do this for the doctor, you know, and the stories are replete. You could go through the California Medical Board archives and discover many doctors have been in these problems. So what did private detectives get in trouble for are impersonating a peace officer. You may not pretend to be the police on any level at any time. Wiretap, and wiretap is obvious, but there's some less obvious forms of wiretap. What if I put a sensor on Courtney's car? Okay, is that a form of electronic invasion of privacy?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what if instead of tapping Courtney's phone, I put a PIN register on her phone that doesn't record her telephone conversations, but it tells me every number she dials and every phone that calls her?
Yeah, definitely invasion of privacy.
There you go. So Courtney has a reasonable expectation of privacy, and it has to be protected. And if I engage in those things, I lose my license and I go to jail. A very justifiably famous private detective operating in Los Angeles for a long time just served 14 years in federal prison for wiretap. And he deserved every day that he served.
Yeah.
So those are examples. Here's another interesting one. It's called obstruction of justice. And that's where I'm holding evidence in a case, and I know that it's evidence in a case. And an attorney serves a subpoena on me demanding that I produce that evidence. And a subpoena it means in Latin under threat of punishment. An attorney is an officer of our courts, and I'm supposed to turn that evidence over. And I say, F you, I don't have it, or you may not have it, or I take the evidence and I burn it, allegedly to protect my client. Okay. Now, I could lose my license and go to jail for those actions.
Sure.
My correct response, right? Correct response would be, I will not say whether or not I have this evidence that you seek, but I'm going to go to court and I'm going to ask for a court order to quash your subpoena. And this is why. It invades the privacy of my client. The relationship with my client is a privileged one, and you're not within the cycle of privilege, and it's not my privilege to waive on any level. And a judge might look at it and say, Nils, these are all entertaining arguments, But I think it would be more entertaining if you brought that evidence down here for the judge to see it. And so the judge might look at it in chambers, he or she, and they call that in camera, where the judge goes into chambers and has a look at the evidence and decides based on what he or she has already seen in the pleadings, whether or not it is relevant and whether or not the subpoena that the attorney has issued to Nils, the detective, has to be obeyed. Okay, so my correct response to the subpoena should not be to destroy evidence. Okay, so those are the big three. I hope that wasn't too didactic or boring.
No, that was fascinating. I know very little about this field, but what is interesting to me is how closely you work with the judicial system. So I'm curious, right?
Well, my best clients are typically law firms, because a lawyer is always in a position to want to know more things about a transaction, about a tort, about the background of a litigant or a defendant or a plaintiff. So often my work does involve producing evidence, reports, that sort of thing that has a great bearing on lawsuits or criminal cases, the grand jury even.
Right.
Those are things that, in a sense, the work that I do is parallel to that of the police or to federal law enforcement. But I'm not a police officer in that sense.
Right.
I use some of the same tools that they do. Right. If a police officer took money to do what I do, it's called a bribe.
All right.
Right. Now, traditionally, there were no detectives. There were just police. And the very first detectives were all private operators. In fact, some of them were criminals. Yes. Oh, sure. The famous French criminal Vidocq became a detective, and there's the Vidocq Society, which solves cold cases. And I think Berthelon was also a criminal who came up with the first biometric system for identifying criminals, meaning a classification system. Berthelon would measure the width of the head and the height of the head, the distance between the eyes and the nose and this sort of thing.
Right.
And he would score it so that it had a classification, so you could take the number. So let's say Nils has a particular number for his classification, and Courtenay is a detective in Lyon. And Courtenay telegraphs the Paris prefecture of police and says, we have an unknown criminal in our jail system who claims his name is Claude Marcel Duchamp. And here are his biometric measurements. Do you have a criminal whose biometric measurements correspond to this system, to these numbers? And they come back and they say, why, yes, this is the notorious burglar Nils Grevillius, and you must detain him for us because he is wanted on several warrants for arrest for burglaries and other mopery. Hang on to him. He's a terrible man. So that's how all that worked. And that predated fingerprints by maybe 50 years.
Wow. So have you witnessed a increase in criminal activity over, like, I don't know, more recently? Like, has there been?
Does Rose Kennedy have a black dress?
Yeah, right.
She's planted in one. So yes, that we have a consequence-free society, but we need to understand how it is that the legislature protecting our interests has done this. They have made things not to be criminal anymore, and that way the shit gibbons of the political media, local, state, and national can claim, well, there really isn't a rise in crime. We're looking at the statistics right here. And that's how the news media fakes news in context and drives the getaway car for the greedy filth that we elect to public office in this state.
Right. Yeah.
I can name names. Name names.
You're welcome to. That's up to you.
There's a particularly reprehensible reporter at the Los Angeles Times named Robin Abkarian,
Okay.
who is endlessly willing to engage in this sort of pettifoggery over what is and what isn't a crime, and what the police should actually be spending their time on. And she's one of the most low, reprehensible pieces of filth ever to style herself a journalist. Now, the Times has traditionally had some great crime writers. I will shout out Chris Goffard, who did the Dirty John series. He's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And he was understudy to no less a writer than Miles Corwin. Miles Corwin teaches at University of California, Irvine, teaches writing and journalism. They're both very smart, wise journalists, and they have a realistic appraisal of what's truly going on. But the editorial policy of the Los Angeles Times is to gaslight readers. It's a little better than a fish wrapper. I wouldn't let my parrot shit upon the Los Angeles Times, if you'll pardon me for being so vulgar.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, what do you see happening in this state moving forward?
Well,
we're about
the frog is already boiled, and the frog likes to take and post selfies of itself in the boiling pot at this point and say how cool it is. There seems to be a vast retinue of unwise people, all the way from the submillennials up to the aged, leathery baby boomers in this state, who are of the belief that embracing filth, decrepitude, crime, corruption, strife, deterioration of objective reality somehow makes them kind or wonderful or virtuous or something like that, as Rome falls down around them. And they have a tendency to elect based on how things make them feel. They're entirely emotional. So we have 3.5 generations of voters who have achieved some sort of either authentic or fictive majority in this state, who vote entirely on how their spleen feels or their heart feels. It waxes and wanes between the two.
Right.
You can't reliably state who wins any election or any measure in the state because of the 9-point model for election fraud, the 9-point California model for election fraud, based on what the Election Integrity Project has put together. You can't tell who's won an election in the state. You can't convince me that California went from solid red to solid blue in one generation. Gray Davis gets recalled in 2003, and after that they start in with redistricting, ballot harvesting, taking ballots from dead bodies, from people in a coma, the mentally retarded, people who don't vote and have no interest in voting and have no recollection of voting, criminals, that sort of thing. And it seems to be a planned Groupon activity of public employee labor unions and hardcore Marxist-Leninist organization groups. And there seems to be quite a bit of overlap between the two, like college professors who like to beat people over the head with bicycle locks at demonstrations and things like that. And they never seem to go to jail when they commit a crime. Everything they do is under prosecuted. They always retain their jobs, their pensions, their benefits, that sort of thing, because they're members of a super PAC, which owns your legislature.
Yep. Yeah. How do you think we got here?
Lassitude, because the GOP wasn't willing to fight. The libertarians make an argumentative case, a rhetorical case, that they are for civil liberties, but the libertarians are very quick to embrace every single tool of their own oppression just based on virtue signaling.
Yep.
Libertarians are as emotional as liberals. Their voting is based on how it makes them feel rather than anything based on tradition, morals, value, laws, that sort of thing. For the Libertarian Party, my contempt is joint, several, and unending at this point. And for the GOP, the voters were always better than the apparatus of the party. The Los Angeles Republicans died with Charlton Heston and Daryl Gates. I'm the only Republican left in Los Angeles other than maybe Karen Sigamund and yourself.
I think I know a few others, conservatives at least, but yeah.
Yeah, but so often they don't want to identify as GOP, and I couldn't blame them. The machinery of the GOP in California is rife with corruption. The worst form of corruption within the GOP in this state is them being secret agents of the Democrat cult. So here, Chad Mays and assholes like that. And I will apologize again for being so vulgar and forthright here. What we have is a party machinery that is lazy, that does what the Democrats tell them to so that they can maintain their tiny bit of bandwidth. They're fearful of a media that hates them no matter what they do. Right. Even when they bend us over for the Democrats, the media still savages them. And like a bunch of obsequious little cucks, they line up to take it. And they want us to line up and take it. And I won't. I would, the Democrats are a sick cult like Jonestown, and the Republicans are a corrupt, inbred, inept version of the Habsburgs, like in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They are inbred to disfigurement. They are owned by banks and real estate developers, and they make a great show of what they're going to do for voters, and they do F all, with certain notable exceptions. Tom McClintock is a prince. He's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Kevin McCarthy is accidentally, occasionally pretty good. I can say
accidentally, yeah.
I can say the same thing of Darrell Issa, even though I personally like the man. Yeah. He could grow a pair of nuts and act like he actually owns them.
Yeah.
Melissa, Melissa Melendez.
I think I do.
She's in the Inland Empire. She's a very fine legislator, and she never backs down. I like her. She's as good as Tom McClintock.
Okay.
But as always, the voters are always better than the politicians within the GOP. Within the Democrat cult, they're interchangeable. The Democrat cult is a disgusting, sick melange of victims and experts in a ratio of about 10 to 1. Yeah. Most of them are victims, and they see themselves as having been robbed by the man, and they can't tell you who the man is unless they tune in Rachel Maddow tonight to download their instructions on who the man is. And then Rachel is, of course, their doctrinaire expert who can tell them all the ways that they've been abused, used, lied to, schnitzeled, and everything else, and how they're going to get their fair share if they just continue voting for the cult, while the cult does it to them over and over again. I'll give you a great example. Look at Black California. Mm-hmm. South Central Los Angeles had 3 generations of Black homeowners. Many of them were living in poor, tough neighborhoods, but they owned their own houses. Mm-hmm. They've all been deported to the 951 and 909 area codes, where they are now impoverished Section 8 renters, and illegal aliens overran the neighborhoods that were theirs, while they were sold on this pitiful idea that welfare was going to take them somewhere that a job would not.
Right. It's travesty. Yeah.
The public employee labor unions, the California Teachers Association, all of them are the authors of this destruction. And the GOP is too weak and inept to point it out. If I was to run for governor of this state, Courtney, mm-hmm. I would campaign in the Black neighborhoods. I would go in there, I'd take the yelling and everything else that comes with it, and I'd say, this is what you got. What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
Larry Elder may yet become governor of the state, He seems to be a very capable man. I've met him a few times, and I count him a friend. But it's as simple as this. Courtney, I'd rather have a sister in the Tijuana donkey cabaret than a brother in the Democrat cult. And I'm embarrassed most of the time to say I'm in the GOP, but here I am. Come and prosecute me. You know?
Right, right. So what do you think, we are about to have a, gubernatorial recall. What are your thoughts on that and what will happen? And yeah.
Well, I think that they'll deliver votes after the polls close. I
Mhm,
think that they will destroy ballots that they dislike. I
mhm,
think that they will have more ballots in some counties than they have registered voters.
mhm.
I think that they will declare Gavin Newsom the come from behind California kid hero. Whether he wins or he loses, they will posture as though he won. Ann Coulter said it beautifully several years ago. Ann Coulter once said, the Democrats hold power, the GOP only holds office.
Yeah,
Have you
that
ever
is well said. I,
seen a Democrat say, "Oh yeah, I lost the election. I guess I didn't work very hard"?
right.
You
I
know,
mean,
they always say that they won, that they got cheated, the voters got lied to, and they hold on to power. And when they can't get it legislatively, they'll file a lawsuit and they'll find a friendly judge. You know?
right, right.
And the GOP will say, "Oh, well, what are we going to do? My goodness." The media might say something cruel about us being racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobic, etc. They're going to say it anyway, so you may as well stand on your
Yeah.
feet and fight. Okay? I'm so sick of it.
So I would, my view is slightly more sinister. I think that the voters and the of the GOP have been demoralized. I think that the electorate and the political class are, and I think they always have been, controlled opposition. And that is why, it's understood that the left will, when they have power, the Democrats will move forth with their agenda. And, the Republicans hold the line, but that really means you just keep for moving the needle, right? It just keeps moving left. And I think there is an understanding in, the political class that that's how it works, because based on observation, that seems to be how it works. So,
Courtney, you're not wrong. Larry Elder, though, may win the election. And once he wins, they'll sue him. They'll stop every single thing that they can. If he issues an executive order, they'll pretend as though it didn't exist. We had a constitutional amendment to have a balanced budget in this state. And so the Democrats just spent outside of the budget, which is just another form of taxation. And the GOP did nothing.
nothing.
They sat on their hands and did nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to reorganize the state. Now, on a national level,
Yeah.
we need to have a convention of states to enact a constitutional amendment specifying how national elections take place, when and how, and who can vote, and how it, so you have to specify identification to register, identification to vote, no special election identification, that it has to be your standard either passport or driver's license. No ballots brought to the polling place after the polls close. Balloting only to take place on election day. People only get absentee ballots if they're absent, meaning overseas in the military. That needs to be specified in a constitutional amendment, with nobody taking another American's ballot to the polling place, because to do so is to allow this level of fraud.
Right.
They can hire a printer, any printer they want, to create as many ballots as they want, and nothing is verified. Nothing is verified.
So as much as, yeah, go on.
So if the states take it up, if 2/3 of the states pass it, then the Congress has to take it up. And I think it needs to be put in there. And the courts can't say that it's unconstitutional if it's in the bloody Constitution.
Right.
How can you say this constitutional amendment is unconstitutional? They have no such power. And we need to take the power away from the judiciary, because we're looking at 50 years of abuse here.
Longer, I would argue, but yes. my concern, I appreciate what you're saying about, that we need to have all of these policies implemented. So, like the voter ID, so forth and so on. However, I'm concerned, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, with doing a convention of states, because yes, the idea is to have a constitutional amendment, but I think that the opposition is so savvy, and I can see that being used against us. I mean, I'm already seeing that with now they're trying to open these cases against several states about the mask mandate, and they're doing it under the equal protection, which is really ironic and really sneaky, because actually it violates the equal protection, right? Because they're saying, well, what about the disabled who have comorbidities or challenges that may make them more sensitive to the current bug that is plaguing, or at least that we're being told is plaguing everyone. But the reality is there are children who have legitimate disabilities for which the mask pose a challenge and a problem for them, and further exacerbate whatever medical ailments or physical challenges they may have. So I use that just as an example of they're very savvy at using, weaponizing against us. So
I would disagree respectfully, Courtney.
yeah,
You have to fight them. And
I don't disagree that you have to fight. I mean, I'm all for the fight. I'm concerned about how we ensure that we don't get crushed in the fight. That's my concern. The strategy and the tactic.
The normal people own 2/3, 4/5 of the state in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get it. That's how you get it going. And it's not as if they're not already stealing it from you. Look what they did in Arizona. They stuffed the ballot boxes using the California model in Maricopa and Pima counties. They did the same thing.
We have so much evidence showing that. Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
Okay. Now, as to these masks, it entertains me. Look at this. We're not even 20 years since 9/11 and bin Laden finally got all of the flabby middle-class white women into their burqas. How beautiful is that? All right. That's exactly what it is. And it's the virtue burqa. You can put your little virtue burqa on, and everybody can know what a caring, sharing, faithful, observant person you are.
Yep.
I am entirely agnostic on COVID-19. I understand some people have health complications and they've got to do something about it. Okay. But you don't treat an infectious disease by going after the healthy. You treat it by going after the people who are not healthy.
Exactly.
And getting them treated. Now,
this is the first time in history we've ever quarantined the healthy. That actually is a violation of the word. The word means to quarantine the sick. That's what it means. So, yeah.
Right. So, and like I said, this is just more of the obvious that you and I already know. What it is that they've done and how they've done it. And they're going to, as long as they can derive power from this, they're going to endlessly reload this gun and shoot it at us. And so I think some of it, like when we get into these didactic discussions about which medicine works and which one doesn't, who got sick from this, and then these hysterical things about children getting sick from a vaccine, that sort of thing. Some of it is scary stuff, and some of it's true. Let me tell you something. My father smacked me in the head as a young child for crying about having to get vaccinated, and pointed out to me that he lost friends during the Depression to diseases that are easily treated now. I consider medicine to be a gift from God, okay? I don't consider Fauci to be a god. Mr. Fauci is just another human being, and he's an obvious political operator. When we overindulge in these discussions, we're falling into their swamp, and I don't want to be in their swamp ever. All right. So when I'm out on the town, I don't wear a mask. I go into stores, theaters, etc., with no mask. If it's somebody's private store and they ask me to wear a mask, that's their private business. I'll wear the mask. Right. I had some Karen in my own office building get hysterically angry at me a couple of months ago. I've had COVID, and I've had both downloads of the Pfizer. I didn't fall over dead from the Pfizer vaccine, thank you. Uh, the COVID itself was like a bad flu. I'm glad that I survived it. I'm okay. But I'm not going to fall into this trap, and I'm not going to let people bully rag me over their stupid ideas while they prance around in the cult. I'm not going to join their cult.
Right.
I'm not going to wear the burqa. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Right.
more people need to practice civil disobedience, because I think a lot of people feel that way. They don't want to wear it, that they, it's not just that they don't want to wear it. Some people actually really have legitimate challenges wearing them. And that doesn't seem to be honored at all. And more people need to stand up, because everybody's kowtowing. Meanwhile, it's a mandate. It's not a law, it's a mandate. And more people need to understand that and stand up against it, because that's the only way to fight it. And I think the next one coming down the pike, I respect your choice to choose to have the injection, but I also feel that it should be a choice. That is not something that should be mandated ever.
Exactly. If people want it, they should go get it. If the vaccination is effective, the vaccinated won't have problems from the unvaccinated. And I will point out one more thing that is being overlooked. We have 70,000 people living under bridges, tarps, freeway, living in refrigerator boxes. They get the clap, they get the flu, they get scabies, they get diarrhea, they get everything. If COVID-19 was as virulently fatal as they keep telling you that it is, those would be vast graveyards, and they are not. Those people are thriving. In fact, their numbers are higher since the COVID started. So I call bullshit, okay?
Right?
And so we're being manipulated and played by an inept government, by a CIA that couldn't foretell 9/11, that bum rushed us into Iraq, that told us our president was a traitor for 5 years, that couldn't tell how fast the Afghan army was going to fall and fold like a cheap suit. What I believe is that they have been faking it for 50 years. They haven't been able to do shit. They've been taking money from us and not earning their keep, and we need to clean house from our Praetorian Guard. One of the things that marked the fall of Rome was the Praetorian Guard selecting who would be emperor and who would not, and who was qualified and who was a traitor and who wasn't, all according to the Praetorian Guard. Well, I will tell you that the FBI, the NSA, and the CIA have failed miserably, jointly and severally, and also our bold, brave Pentagon. Mark Milley is a pompous ass. The man should be relieved of duty. If I was his squad leader, Mr. Milley would be buffing floors in the orderly room and emptying the garbage. Okay, he's not fit to wear the uniform. We have officers who have been elevated beyond any semblance of competence by politicians because those officers were willing to go along with this SJW nonsense. The military is not about drag queen drama. The military is about breaking things and killing people and occasionally feeding people who can't take care of themselves. But that should not be the primary role of our army. If they have their way, Courtney, we will wind up with a military that is a uniform, politically correct, transgendered, Meals on Wheels force for the third world. And all the real fighting will be done by drones, clones, robots, and mercenaries, while our politicians derive insulation from the consequences of their shitty ideas. We really have to hold them to it.
Yeah, it's a horrifying thought. It's a horrifying thought. I do think that these agencies have failed us for a very long time, and now they are, and perhaps they have been all along, but now we're really seeing them turn against the American people. And
let me ask you a question. Does NBC have an office at the CIA, or does the CIA have an office at NBC? How do you pick apart the political media from our national security apparatus? I mean, this is like separating the men from the boys in the Trojan Navy 3,000 years ago with a pry bar and a baseball bat or something. It's like they're interchangeable with each other. And is the Democrat cult part of the media, or is the media part of the Democrat cult? I can't tell them apart. There's so much incestuous interplay between the press offices of this senator and this sort of thing. Well, them and the Chinese intelligence service. I mean, let's talk about Dianne Feinstein having a Chinese intelligence officer for a driver for 19 years.
Right.
So we're doing this over and over again. And I think that China is the hidden hand in a lot of things. Here, I'll give you a good example. Who is our actual Federal Reserve? Who is setting economic policy in this country? Does China do it deftly through Wall Street? Do the Chinese want us to be a trading partner, or do they want us to be a fat dairy cow that they artificially inseminate with easy capital so that they can milk us? And we have Wall Street that that they can buy any politician that they seem to want. Look at these Republican senators who unloaded their stock portfolio's in advance of the COVID-19 restrictions.
No insider trading there, no.
Yeah, and they did it, with such a facile look on it. Kelly Loeffler, like it, oh yeah, what's the big deal? Right. I just saved myself $6 million. Wouldn't you save $6 million?
No big deal.
Right, it's no big deal. Well,
it's no big deal when they do it, but when we do it, it's called insider trading, and we are criminally charged for it.
Right. Yeah. So we keep blathering on and on and on and on about COVID-19. Courtney, we have 122 Americans dead every single day in this nation from narcotics overdose. Yeah. And I'm not talking about Purdue Pharmaceutical. I'm talking about fentanyl and heroin.
Of course. Okay? And opium and opioids and
We have two narco states that we are endlessly involved with, one of which is Afghanistan. 2/3 of Afghanistan's GDP arises of heroin. They don't care about the rare earth metals that the Chinese are about to suction out of their.
Although they have lithium, which the Chinese do care about. Yeah.
That's what I was just saying. The rare earth metals. They won't. Yep. But 2/3 of their economy is based entirely on the heroin trade.
Yeah.
And then with the fentanyl, all the fentanyl precursor chemicals come from China. And they come up from Mexico. Believe it or not, I'm so surprised. It's all coming from Mexico. Why would we close that border when we're losing 122 Americans every single day for the past 16 years to this? Okay. It's more than gun violence. It's more than COVID-19. And they say that there's a public health crisis and they need to do something about it. So they're going to make Courtenay and Nils wear the burqa and get the shot. If you want the shot, you get the shot, whatever. I don't want the fentanyl shot, and I don't want my son getting the fentanyl shot or my daughter getting the fentanyl shot. Sure. Okay. We need to seal that border up, and we need to start returning the heroin to the places that it comes from by drone delivery. I think we should be raining dime bags all over Mexico and Afghanistan so that they can experience some unregulated heroin distribution within their borders. The reason that they do it is because they get away with it. And
they're making a fortune off of it. Yeah.
They're making a fortune off of it. And the hell of the war on drugs was we waged war on users. We waged war on pitiful addicts and put them in jail. Well, jail often saved their lives, and that I agree with, is saving their lives. But we never dropped bombs on the sons of bitches importing the heroin and the fentanyl and the cocaine, that sort of thing. We had the CIA turning a blind eye while CIA assets trafficked cocaine in this country to underwrite a guerrilla war in Latin America. The CIA didn't traffic it, but the CIA looked the other way while the men and women who were their intelligence assets did it, okay? And that was probably one of the single most cynical moves by any American agency ever. It's right up there with the
there were many, but yes, it was one of them.
Experiment. It's the worst shit in the world. So we need to seal up our southern border. We need to have a catapult to return criminal illegal aliens to where they came from. No more Mr. Nice Guy. And we also need to get rid of the sons of bitches who protect them. How about this? I get caught employing illegal aliens at my company. I pay a $50,000 per illegal alien fine. If I'm a building developer and I'm hiring illegal alien construction workers, how about a $50,000 per illegal alien tax lien on the property so that I can't sell the property without paying the United States government? How about you can't have a bank account in this country if you don't have a legitimate Social Security number? How about you can't borrow money from a federally insured institution if you don't have a legitimate Social Security number? How about things like that? And you remove the people who are harboring them. If you catch a judge protecting, like that judge in Massachusetts and her bailiff who wanted to get the illegal alien away from ICE, that woman should be in prison for 30 years. The mayor of Oakland, it's obstruction of justice. It's RICO charges. It's racketeering is what it is.
Yep, that's exactly what it
is. Those people should be in irons, okay? We're not doing anything for our immigrant community by protecting criminal legal aliens. The people that they victimize most of all are the immigrant community. That's what Donald Trump said, that Mexicans were raped. He didn't say Mexicans were rapists. He said that Mexican immigrant women were being raped at the border by other Mexican nationals. And for anybody to insist that he said that Mexicans are rapists is a grotesque fraud of rhetoric and nothing else. And he was entirely correct. You can ask anybody working in our border patrol about the shit that they see on our southern border. And Mexico will never change. 2/3 of Mexico's GDP arises of the processing of narcotics and the sale of narcotics from Mexico and other countries. Mexico has vast opium fields in Sinaloa that will never be burned down because that's their big political issue. That's the reason Mexico never matures as a political entity or as an economy. It's because they don't have to. All of their political fights are over how are we going to divide this money up. Their fights are never over how are we going to make this country more prosperous, more productive, more competitive. They don't have to compete. No. So we need to seal that border up. We need to cease trading with them unless and until they can get a handle on it, and let them eat each other and return all of the heroin to them by drone delivery. It's a radical idea, but give it back to them. It's theirs. Let them have it.
Yeah.
They consider it so valuable. Let them enjoy it. Let their children die of heroin overdose. I don't care.
Yeah.
Why should we have more integrity than they have? Why should we care more about them than they care about us?
Right.
Nobody can make a legal argument for it. Nobody can make an ethical argument for it. People only make rhetorical arguments about how we need to be the sucker state for these people, okay? Right. Mexico will not mature unless it is made to, They have every intellectual resource that we have, and they have some natural resources we do not possess. Okay, why do we diminish them with this grotesque pretense that because they're brown people, quote unquote, that they cannot support themselves, feed themselves, build their own nation? Look at South Korea. South Korea got the shit bombed out of it. There was nothing left of the country by the end of the Korean War in 1953. They had nothing other than people. It was one of the poorest countries in Asia. And in 35 years, South Korea went from third world to first world. And it wasn't with their hand in our pockets. Yeah, we had troops there to prevent North Korea from invading again, but the South Koreans did it entirely on their own, and they did it by not by selling narcotics, but by building and selling things that people actually need.
Right, right. Yep.
The Koreans don't possess anything the Mexicans don't have. The Mexicans have all the same resources the South Koreans have.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying that while we're wasting time with COVID-19, my question though is they're using COVID-19, and you were talking about China, being trying to control and rise to power. I see it slightly differently. I don't disagree with that, but I see there's the globalists, there's the World Economic Forum, and they use China as the model and the conduit for all of it. And right. And they use COVID as kind of the mechanism to be able to enforce all of these controls to execute their plans. So what do you think? I get what you're saying about how we're getting caught up in the minutia of COVID. But I don't think COVID is irrelevant. And I'm not sure, like, what do you propose? Like, I think people need to be fighting against a lot of these, the invisible hand of COVID being, or it's not so invisible at this point, but the COVID draconian measures that are being utilized under the pretense that we have that there's a need for it.
Well, if we don't have political power in this country, we can't fight anything other than through civil disobedience, as you've already pointed out. Right. And as long as they can derive power from this, they will beat us with this stick over and over again and try to keep. The World Health Organization is inexorably tied to the World Trade Organization, is inexorably tied to the United Nations, is inexorably tied to transnational billionaires like George Soros and Warren Buffett and people like that.
Yep.
So, it's a world economy. If Courtenay borrows $1 million from the bank and Courtenay can't pay the bank back, Courtenay has real problems. She really does. If Courtenay borrows $10 billion from the bank and Courtenay can't pay the bank back or won't, the bank has real problems.
Right. Right.
We have to be willing to make problems. We have to be willing to say to them, no, we're not going to pay your money back. You didn't lend in good faith. How about this? How about you stop producing health crises? You give your people some civil rights and allow them to vote. You run something resembling a representative republic. Mm-hmm. You cease stepping on everybody's trademarks and copyrights and patents. Yep. And if you won't do that, go to hell. Trade with yourselves. You've got 1 billion people in China. You could live very happily. You could be your own planet, your own universe. Call it the universe of China and just be Chinese in China. Don't do it to us. And the problem isn't the Chinese people, obviously. The problem is their government.
Of course. I was just thinking that. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. The people are wonderful. The people are people. There's some wonderful people. They're, yeah. It's the government. Yeah, the CCP.
So we need to pull ourselves out of things like the WTO and the United Nations. I would evict the United Nations. It's a useless Marxist debating organ that does nothing but perpetuate espionage and terrorism within and without the United States. I'd get rid of that. I would restore the Federal Reserve to the Federal Reserve. I wouldn't let China set economic policy in this country. I wouldn't let any foreign tied business donate even a dime of money to any political figure at any time in this country. And if somebody got caught taking money from them, they would be forever ineligible for government service on an elected level. It might take another convention of the states, but you have to do it. You have to divorce money from foreign money from how we do our politics in this country. That said, I believe that donations to politicians should be wide open and unlimited. If I want to give Courtenay Turner $1 billion to run for the mayor of Long Beach, I should be able to do that, but it has to be openly disclosed. There should be no more insider trading for politicians of any kind.
Yeah.
We should clean house at the CIA and the FBI and the NSA.
Yes.
We should also clean house at the Fed. We should clean house at the Internal Revenue Service. We should debunk the Internal Revenue Code. There are a lot of things that we should be doing that we're not. We should institute a draft so our national security is done by citizens rather than the desperate, with no exceptions. If you say that you're too infirm to be a soldier or a sailor, then you can be in the Space Corps or the Cyber Corps. And if you are too ethical to do it, you are a conscientious objector, that is good. You can be so ethical in your conscientious objection that you never take another public dollar ever, not to eat, not to educate, not for healthcare, not for anything, because we wouldn't want to compromise your precious ethics with our filthy, lucrative American dollars. That is what we need to do. Do you realize during World War II, we had American men who were infirm, who were crippled, who would put braces on to pass a physical exam after having had polio so that they could be soldiers and Marines. And now we have men and women who fake ethics so that they can avoid doing anything for this country. And they're the same
sons of
bitches.
Ethical, is it?
Right. Well, and they're the same sons of bitches who show up wanting every single thing from you and I. They want me to pay for their education. They want me to pay for their health care. They want me to pay for their housing.
Of course.
And without doing it, without sacrificing anything. Right. Let me point something out. Moderate Republicans have something in common with liberals, and it is their children are always liberals.
Yeah. Yep.
When have you met a moderate Republican whose son or daughter was anything other than a bomb-throwing Marxist? They're always like that.
Yeah. Well, it's because they refuse to hold firm on the cultural issues, and that's exactly how the left infiltrates. I mean, the Marxists had a term, it was called Affenhaven, and it was literally to destroy the culture. And that is what they do. So as soon as you, compromise on that, you've lost completely.
Well, far more enduring than laws are customs, Courtenay. And if you can change a nation's customs, you have permanently disfigured it.
Yeah.
So the way that you go after customs is culturally, not legally. The laws will change as the result of the changed customs and the changed culture.
Yeah. So true.
And that's exactly what they've done.
Yeah.
So they deteriorate objective reality. They make good bad and bad good.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's exactly what they do. We have tens of thousands of hardcore left-wing activists in this country who can do anything.
No.
They can firebomb a bank. They can firebomb a police car and be identified as Ivy League educated lawyers and face no consequence. They can practice law right now, and Rudy Giuliani cannot. Right?
It's astounding.
Did you see David Boies? Did you see David Boies or Larry Tribe lose their law licenses after arguing that Albert Gore had won the 2000 election? They didn't lose their law licenses, did they?
No.
They did not. Okay, no. So they're trying to prosecute Rudy Giuliani for a privileged argument before the courts. No, they're violating our own Constitution in that sense. I hope Rudy Giuliani really goes after them, and I suspect that he will. He's one of the most capable men in this country. He's a rugged individual.
Yeah.
In a country that produces far too few rugged individuals anymore. You're a rugged individual, plain to see. I've seen it in your podcast. You had to be. No one was going to be Courtenay's rugged individual. Courtenay had to be her own rugged individual.
Thank you.
Look at Karen Siegemund. Mm-hmm. She is somebody I greatly admire. She never backs down.
Nope.
She has tits of steel.
Yeah.
And she didn't like Donald Trump at first, and she
Mm-hmm.
might not like him today, but she backed his presidency, and she fearlessly confronted those who were acting extra constitutionally against the president on our side. And there were
Oh,
lots
yeah.
of them who claimed to be on our side,
Yeah.
who were happy to slither into the oily muck of the swamp with the Democrats because they'd rather be in the swamp than with the voters.
Yeah.
I don't have to be in love with Donald Trump to support him as a president.
Of course. And
Right.
I think this this is something I talk about a lot too. I think we become a culture of splitting. It's this binary thinking where somebody is either the devil or the Messiah. And when you're picking a political candidate, they're never going to be perfect. You're never going to agree with them 100% of the time. I don't agree with anybody, even people I greatly respect, 100% of the time, because I think for myself. And so you have to be willing to adjudicate, the cost analysis of it. Is this person going to do more good for the country than harm? Am I going to like everything they do? Maybe not. But, that's what you're voting. You're not voting, oh, this is somebody who is like, going to be save the day and, can do no wrong.
Let me point out a cultural difference between us and them, though. We have our fights, and we air our fights publicly.
Yep.
And then we continue fighting. And then once the guy gets elected, we snipe at him from behind. Okay, the Democrats are in lockstep. If Barack Obama had told them to eat a turd burrito, they'd have eaten it and would have declared it to be the new national delicacy.
Yeah.
They never publicly air their fights.
Nope.
And once they have a candidate, they will kill people to protect the candidate that they hated a week ago. Look at
Literally.
the fight that Sloppy Seconds had with Sloppy Joe in the debates, where she called him a racist and a misogynist and everything else.
Right.
And then the moment that she gets elevated to a nomination she could never have achieved in a normal election, she's got her lips wrapped around his ass and is calling him the greatest thing since electric lights.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yes.
that's a cultural difference. And we have these people who claim to be on our side, and
Right.
they're constantly backpedaling, and they've got these purity tests for this and that. And if somebody doesn't completely do every single thing that they want, they'll stay home. They won't donate money. They won't get involved in any kind of a neighborhood thing. And then they'll secretly go and vote for the Democrat and act like they did something good, and they have not.
No, they're doing more harm.
They precisely are. So you can't look within the GOP today and identify any national leader other than Donald Trump. There is no, Rand Paul comes pretty close.
Although he certified against Trump on the 6th, but.
Right, I know. And
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis is
Yeah.
another one who could be a national leader.
Mhm.
A lot of the people who tried to present themselves as potential national leaders turned out to be owned by Wall Street. I'll give you a great example. Nikki Haley is one of the most
I don't think she's just a self-serving opportunist. I don't think she's ever made a convincing argument otherwise.
Right. And then how about Trey Gowdy, who made such a rhetorical flourish about how he was with the voters, but would ratify every single thing that the Barack Obama FBI had done to Donald Trump.
Yep.
And then run for re-election in the Congress so that he can go be a lobbyist.
Right.
That's another example of a truly disappointing man. John McCain distinguished himself in the United States Senate for his willingness to betray voters every single chance that he got. He was the single greatest asset that the Democrats had in the United States Senate for 30 years. And I can't overstate that. Yep. He would go along with them on anything. And it was all about his ego and getting fluffed up by the shit gibbons of the political media. Mitch McConnell is
that's just who came to mind next. Yep. He's done more for the left than anybody in a long time. Yeah.
He is Lord Baelish. He does what the Chinese tell him to.
Yep.
And that's about it. Occasionally he is good, but usually he is not. You can never trust a bloody thing that he says. To say that he is better than Harry Reid is like saying that dog shit is better than cat shit. I don't want either Tootsie Roll, thank you. I want to be home for the holidays, each and every one of them, Courtney. These people are doing nothing for us, but how is it that they hold on to power? Well, they do it through Wall Street. They get the money, yep. They control the ad buys, the party controls who can advertise what.
Yep.
You know,
so I'm currently, I'm currently, it's been very much delayed. I should have gotten this out a long time ago, but I'm working on an article on, BlackRock and Vanguard and Serco and how they are, foisting the Great Reset through shadow banking. And it is exactly that, they're, behind the scenes. I mean, the CEO of BlackRock is on the board of the WEF, and we see that with how they're foisting the feudalism, and people are starting to become aware of it, but I don't think that they understand the depths of it. So BlackRock owns they're like the second top shareholder of Serco, who has all the government contracts around the world, and who works in conjunction with the SES. So yeah, they're really running the show. They hold the funds, and so as the saying goes, money makes the world go round, right? So
well, okay, so I'll point out a couple of things. North of the Canadian border, Bill and Melinda Gates control the Canadian National Railway System. You can look it up. It's been in the Wall Street Journal. They own a majority of that.
Yep.
And that's tanker cars. Okay. And south of the Canadian border in this nation, it's Warren Buffon. It calls himself the Oracle of Omaha. He's the orifice of Omaha is what he is. He actually lives in Newport Beach 11 and a half months out of the year and pretends to live in Omaha. I know somebody who used to be on his security detail, and that's how I know that.
Wow.
So he owns Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which controls 90% of the tanker cars south of the US border. I wonder why Sloppy Joe canceled the XL pipeline. And that's precisely it. They want to spike the price of oil and then get government subsidies for electric vehicles. I myself, in full disclosure, I'm a lithium investor. I'm heavily invested in American lithium mining. Paul Pelosi Jr. is on the boards of directors of several lithium mining outfits and owns tens of millions of shares in lithium mining.
Right.
So Mommy Dearest will make sure that Sonny Boy does very well on that.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's disgusting what it is that I'm seeing, and that's what it is that they're doing. They can't play in a game that isn't rigged in their favor. Mm-hmm. I will point out that the single most deleterious effect of socialism is that it is contra-competitive. It strangles competition, and competition is what drives innovation and improves goods and services more than anything else. So there are two things that kill competition: monopolies and socialism. Those two things.
And monopolies are really just another variation of fascism, right? All of those lead to tyranny. So whether it's the socialism or the fascism, yeah.
Right. So the tendency of men like Warren Buffon and Bill and Melinda Gates mm-hmm. is to climb the ladder of success and then kick the ladder away so that nobody can compete with them, which is exactly why they are so prone to monopolies. Another thing, and I will harken back to my objection to the idiots of the Libertarian Party, and I do hope they're listening. Section 230, Twitter, Assbook, all of this, they are exercising powers of government.
Yes, and they're working with government agencies. Sorry.
Well, and choosing what is legitimate speech versus what is not, while while hosting political debate. They are exercising powers of government. And it is time for the Sherman Antitrust Act to be fully implemented, to break these companies up and take away their ability to do this. I'm going to point out that in 2008, when the Golden Child ran for president, Assbook, Mark Zuckerberg's people, got completely behind him and gave him every single tool of analytics that he wanted for free. They helped them style their ads and everything. It all went out the door for free.
Wow.
Same thing in 2012. And then once the business model was up where they could charge money for it, Cambridge Analytics bought it and helped Donald Trump get elected. Well, they determined, well, we're never going to allow that to happen again. Okay. We need to regulate the shit out of these sons of bitches.
Yeah.
You know, we wouldn't allow Exxon Mobil to determine what the national price of gasoline is going to be. We wouldn't let AT&T decide what you're going to pay for a cell phone, would we? We would not. We would not allow Pfizer to decide what you're going to pay for an abortion, for dental care, for a COVID vaccine, any of that. You're going to want competition in these things.
Right.
Well, it's time to break these sons of bitches up and to regulate them. And also a federal grand jury needs to be convened over the 2020 election and the choices that Twitter and Facebook and Google made in what to stifle and what not, and the cross communication between the Democrat cult and them. I mean, it was like that. It was a hand in glove relationship. And nobody did anything about it. Nobody in the GOP did anything about it. They didn't want to. You know, they wanted to see things to return to that cozy, muddy normal that they adore so much while they fleece us.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
So I hope I haven't been too vulgar for your taste, Courtney.
No. I think it's appropriate. There's not really a polite way to put any of this. So yeah, this is, I think
anybody who isn't angry at this point is either corrupt or stupid.
I would concur. Yeah, absolutely. And I think more people need to take action on their anger. I think there are a lot of people who are angry and are being demoralized instead of empowered. And
that is correct. That's quite purposeful. They're doing it quite purposefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are some, things that, like, on the individual level that you encourage people to do who may be feeling demoralized?
To never back down, to never let anybody tell them what to think or how to feel.
Yeah.
Don't let people edit what you think, what you say, what you post, what you write. You're going to have to take some risks in life.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Right.
Falcons don't eat worms, nor shall I.
Right. Have you always maintained the views that you have now, or was there a journey in that?
I was raised to be a labor Democrat. I did my military service. In 1988, I met a man who was running for president in my party who told me he was a Vietnam combat veteran, that he carried an M16 in Vietnam. He wanted me to donate and vote for him. I gave him some money. I didn't have a lot of money, but I gave him some of my money. And I later on found out that he was a liar, that he didn't see a day of combat because his father was a United States Senator. He did a 5-month tour of Vietnam as a journalist in the Army with 2 full-time bodyguards who were CID agents. His name was Albert Gore. And I left the Democrat Party on the spot. That was the end of my association with the Democrat Party. I always sort of lionized JFK. And I still have a certain amount of respect for the man. And I'll illustrate it like this. Mm-hmm. He was a young man He was Ivy League educated. He was from practical royalty in the Northeast.
Sure.
He was an officer in our Navy serving in the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
His PT boat got cut in half by a Japanese destroyer. He lost 2 crewmen and 1 man was badly burned. They found a small island with no water and rested there. And they knew that there was an island in a particular direction that they could go to. In the middle of the night, he took the straps of the burned sailor's life jacket in his teeth and he swam 13 miles towing that burned sailor. And no one would have faulted a young callow lieutenant for leaving a man behind under those circumstances in that war. Nobody would have judged him poorly. Right. And he didn't have to do it. The man couldn't do a effing thing for him. Couldn't pay him anything. Maybe he was planning on running for Congress or Senate later, but I'm sure that the United States Congress was not on JFK's mind that night when he did that.
Right.
So the man did that. And later he became president. He wasn't a perfect president. He did some bad things. But I will tell you, one of the things that really damaged the Democrat Party and transformed it from a party of working Americans into a cult was their willingness to believe and indulge endlessly speculation and innuendo and rumor as to the circumstances of that American sailor president's, how he was murdered. The only person who murdered JFK was an American communist named Lee Harvey Oswald. If you want to see what Antifa looked like in 1963, take a hard look at Lee Oswald. Look at the people that he associated with. He was a communist. The reason Jack Ruby murdered him was because Jack Ruby was so offended that an American war hero could be assassinated by a snot-nosed communist punk like Oswald, that he took the law into his own hands. And those are his own words. I'm not speculating. That's what Jack Ruby said. All right? There is no, it's not any more complicated than that. Lee Oswald murdered an American president and calmly walked down the street on his way to a movie theater. I have always believed that he thought he was going to meet with Cuban or Russian intelligence in that theater to be whisked away, for his heroic deed in pursuit of Leninist revolution in this country. On his way, he murdered a Dallas police officer with his pistol, and he sat in that theater, pulling his pud, picking his nose, whatever, waiting for whomever to visit with him. And the the Soviet Union or Cuba saw on the radio, the television, that JFK had been shot, and they knew who did it, and they called off their own meeting. That's what I've always believed. Now there are 27 redacted pages from the Warren Commission of FBI material. And what I believe is that Lee Oswald was under surveillance on the day that he murdered our president. And the FBI was confused, bedazzled. They couldn't figure out what the hell the man was doing when he went to work that day. That's what I think.
You think they
couldn't figure it out. He had been under surveillance because a few weeks before, he went to Mexico City and visited the Cuban and Russian embassies in Mexico City, and he was under surveillance then. He had once defected to the Soviet Union and came back with a Russian wife. The Russians figured out what a piece of shit he was, and 86'd him. Some weeks before he murdered JFK, he tried to murder General Walker with the same rifle. It wasn't anyone's rifle other than his. And all of those stupid conspiracy movies about the CIA couldn't find its ass with both hands in a butt-sniffing dog, Courtney, okay? The CIA, the mafia, Richard Nixon, it's all bullshit. It was an Antifa member who murdered him. Now, they can say that he wasn't an organized Antifa. How organized is Antifa? What do they organize?
Mhm.
Potluck supper? Homosexual orgies? I mean, what does Antifa organize? I mean, okay, and they burn banks and police stations down, and they wear their Portland tuxedo, and they never go to jail for anything because they are the muscle. They're the military wing of the Democrat cult. The Democrat cult used to have a different masked military wing called the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what Antifa is for, is to intimidate people into going along. And many of them are public employees. They're members of the teachers union. They're members of SEIU. They're members of the clerks union, shit like that. They're absolute filth, and they belong in jail, and they shouldn't be on the public tit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They should be forced to work like Americans do. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, they want more power than just one vote is what they want.
For sure.
You know? And they hate competition. Have you ever noticed that socialists despise authentic competition? And what attracts people to socialism is their perceived inability to compete. You know, that's why it's such a warm bosom for all of them. They love that tit of not having to actually do it, earn it, that sort of thing. And they can sit around in their dirty underwear and smoke dope and organize and shit like that. And they're filth. Okay. If socialism was capable of repairing a country, we should deport every single one of them to Haiti and let them repair Haiti. The reason they won't go to Haiti is because there's nothing left to steal. The Clintons got it all. Okay.
Yeah. Very true.
Speaking of countries with rare earth metals.
Speaking of country, what?
Haiti has rare earth metals.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Right? And so you know who's there to mine it, right?
Right.
China.
Right. Yeah. What a coincidence.
While the Haitians stay poor.
They what?
The Haitians stay poor.
Right. Yeah.
Can I point something out?
Yeah, please.
1994, we invaded Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
Some child molester priest, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, claimed to have won the election. And Raul Cedras wasn't going to allow him to take the throne of Haiti. Maybe he did win, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to Jesse Jackson for help.
Uh-huh.
And Jesse Jackson goes to Bill Clinton and he says, now look here, Bill, if you want the backing of the black community to get you elected president, you're going to get on up in there and you're going to install Jean-Bertrand Aristide on the throne. So the United States military invaded Haiti.
Right.
Without UN intervention of any kind. Mm-hmm. Remember how precious UN mandates are when you're invading another country? I can't remember Haiti ever attacking the United States. Courtney, maybe you can.
No, I don't remember that. No.
Right. So we invaded Haiti and several $1 billion of aid went to Haiti. And the only person wealthier at the end of that than at the beginning was Jesse Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what I see.
I see it too. It's pretty daunting. Do you think there's hope for the future? The future of this state, the future of this country, the future of this world and humanity.
Courtenay Turner.
Yeah.
Falcons don't eat worms. Never allow greasy pimps to dictate whether or not you're having a good day, a good life, a good way. Right?
Right.
Never allow these people to ever set the direction of your sails, rearrange the hands on your clock.
Right.
Anything. Right? Even the ones on our side have no business dictating whether or not I have a good life. I have a good life no matter what. I'm an American. I'm an American. If you go through the airport in Orlando, there's an artistic display of the flotsam and jetsam and junk that Cubans used to make rafts to brave the Florida Strait to get to the United States.
Right.
Okay. You have to be worthy of that. You know, we're born here. I utterly reject the idea that there is white privilege as a great problem in this country. Let me point out, though, that there is such a thing as American privilege.
I think
This
so.
is the greatest country in the world. We have it really good. Everybody in this country does.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to them to make the most of it. Right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a great thing, tremendous thing to be an American. Men and women will risk their lives, you know, to become Americans.
Yeah,
you know?
they do every day.
We should not dilute our franchise in any way. We should have very high standards for becoming an American.
Absolutely.
You know? And we should have very high standards for people who already are Americans. What is expected of us? If I wanted to remake our university system, Courtney, I'd completely do away with federal guarantees on loans and make it so that any student now or with a past loan can bankrupt his student debt. Just file for bankruptcy. Go through the processes, mess your credit up for 10 years. Yeah, who cares? All right. By the time you're bankrupt, right? And all those banks and institutions that had a hand in glove relationship with university systems with fat, lazy, dope smoking professors whose entire occupation involved transgendered, lesbian, ceramic poetry and shit like that should all have to get an honest job.
Yeah.
You know? Rather than sit around inspecting the felt patches on the elbows of their sweaters and beating each other off. Pardon me for being vulgar. If we did that, we would dramatically reduce the cost of university education. We would make the universities much more flinty about who they admit under what reason.
Yeah.
We would be forcing our high schools to go back into the business of education rather than daycare and indoctrination.
Yeah. Indoctrination.
And we'd go a long way to restoring the cultural norms of this nation.
Yeah.
And everybody can benefit from that without regard to race or orientation or faith.
Yeah, for
Everybody
sure.
can benefit from that.
Everyone can benefit from that. It's
Yeah.
about equal opportunity. And with the less indoctrination, we have a lot more of that. So
That is correct. And if I have a publicly funded college system in my state, the top 10% of admissions to those colleges should go only to domestic students from that state, California.
for sure.
Okay? And if somebody wants to come in from another state, that's great. They can compete. Somebody wants to come in from a foreign country, let them compete, but let them pay through the nose for it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how
not be given it for free.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you there. Courtney, you're very wise.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, for sure. I actually, that was one of the first articles I wrote for TruthMatters was on the student debt.
I remember that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge issue for sure. I think we need to privatize a lot more things in general. So
can I point out to you that what the cure for cannibalism was in ancient man?
Oh, do tell. I'm not sure I know.
Well, Courtney, if you and I were to go back into the natural ossuaries of ancient man, the caves in Borneo or France or Argentina,
right,
we would find the carefully scraped bones, tool scraped bones of lesser men. And you and I are descendant of the better hunters. Being a better hunter 50,000, 100,000 years ago meant hunting other men in addition to other animals. And that's just the reality of it. So what ended cannibalism in Homo sapiens, Courtney, was slavery. It was the market-based solution, in that ancient man discovered he could get far more from a captive if he worked him than if he killed him and ate him outright, or if he had her bear children and the children were workers. That was the market-based solution.
Wow, I did not know that.
The market-based solution to slavery was not enlightenment. The market-based solution to slavery was the realization that wage workers would make a nation wealthier than slave labor.
Yeah.
And that was the gamble that a radical named Abraham Lincoln took when 8/10 of our economy was tied directly or indirectly to slave labor. He knew that if slaves were wage workers, that the United States would be a wealthier, more prosperous, productive nation.
For sure.
He was a radical for his willingness to invert 8/10 of our economy. Yeah. Sure, he had some noble ideas behind him, and bless him, he paid with his life for his noble ideas.
Good.
Abraham Lincoln, the very first Republican. We should always look to Abe Lincoln.
Yes.
Great American.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So there we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was incredible. I learned so much. Do you have anything else that you would like to add? And definitely tell people where they can find you if you would like that.
Well, I'm getting ready to publish yet another book. Awesome. And it is a satire, a political satire called The Pig Pen That Fell from Grace with the Gods.
Ooh.
I just have to engage an artist. I have to find the right artist to do the cover.
Ooh.
And it will be up on Amazon soon enough. And it's about the disgusting melange of politics and entertainment, and news and weather in California. And you may even enjoy it. I know that you like to read, Courtney.
I do. I
want to thank you for privileging me with a guest spot on your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, the honor was mine. Yeah, thank you.